You don't know how you did it?
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I know how I did it.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to AC Valley. We do have the meeting live here within the cafeteria, but we're also live streaming that as well. My name is David McDevitt. I'm the superintendent here at AC Valley, and we have a number of board members and administrators and employees from both AC Valley and Union here to discuss co-ops. And we have a number of items to cover today. But before we get into it, just some housekeeping. If there is an emergency, we do have exits on all four areas. We have the restroom down to my right and an AED to the left. And we have the water fountain down there for your water.
If Paul goes down now, I just want to hit him. I don't want to use that
Just to talk a little bit about the history, because we've had a lot of new faces come and go. Kids graduate and school board members come and go. But back in the 16-17 school year, our football program got to the point where we could not host a game. And we just didn't have enough numbers. We had lost 44 games in a row. That was 4.5 years. And we needed support for our kids. And we talked to a number of surrounding schools, and everybody would welcome us to be part of their team. But only Union was gracious enough to say, hey, let's look at this as a full 50-50 merger. And we developed a contract. We put it in front of the school board, and the adults worked very diligently to provide as many opportunities as possible for our students. And that football program is what it is today because of the collective effort of all the adults in both communities. So I do thank everybody for that work. We also have added additional co-ops throughout the years and continue to discuss various co-ops as we work through there. Unfortunately, northwestern Pennsylvania, we have a declining student enrollment in Clarion County and a number of counties in our areas. And we constantly open up and we talk about various needs of both school districts and the number of students and future co-ops. So we discuss them at the end. We have joint meetings. We discuss at the end of each season as well as the beginning of the next. And at this time, I just want everybody to know that we are looking at developing a co-op for the girls basketball program because at AC Valley, we are in great need. We have a number of graduating seniors, and we feel as if a co-op would provide our students with more opportunities in the JV program and varsity program. And that's the only co-op that we're discussing tonight as well. I do have an agenda in front of you. We have a front and back to that. I'm going to cover a couple items. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jordan, and we'll be open for any kind of questions or comments that the public may have. Just keep in mind that I copied policy 906, public complaint. So if we have a parent who's concerned about a teacher or a coach or any kind of employee, we do encourage that the parents start that discussion with that particular employee. If you need support from an administrator, we're there. If somehow, some way that does not resolve the issue, then we ask that you go to the second level. And generally, that's the principal or the immediate supervisor of that coach, which could be the athletic director to sit in to help facilitate that conversation. If at that time the complaint or the concern is not resolved, then we do ask that you meet with the superintendent, and that's at both schools, and take it to the third level. The superintendent will collect information and provide the notes and the detailed report to the school board. And if it's not resolved at that point, then we can present the topic to the school board, or the school board could write a response back. And I just shared that with you because I don't know if everybody understands the true procedure. And by no means would I tell any community member not to talk to a school board member. That's not the point of it. It's the point that they're elected officials and they have a very, very difficult job. And a lot of times they don't understand the intricacies of what's going on within that sport or within that program. So we do ask that we work our way up through the chain of command. And if it needs to get to the school board level, then definitely we have wonderful school board members at both schools, and they're willing to work with you and address that. So at this time, as we continue to move into the specific co-op discussion, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jordan. He's going to talk a little bit about timelines and processes And he sits on the KSAC committee and is very well versed. And then once he gets through his opening, and we have a mic set up, and if any parent or community member would like to address the school board or administration, we do encourage you to approach the mic. So at this time, Dr. Jordan.
Thank you. I did want to specifically address a few things that are listed in the PIAA handbook. And, just so everybody knows, it's difficult to read what's in the PIAA handbook when you are not an attorney. So some of these things, we are trying to decipher as we look down through some of those items. But I'd like to bring up a couple of different things. Number one, starting with why we have had discussions about co-opting. The most obvious, of course, is the fact that some of our numbers in certain levels of sports are low. Girls basketball, for example, this year was a pretty clear indicator that something needed to be done if we were going to continue to have girls basketball at AC Valley. And I know Union's numbers are also very low there. The PIAA handbook goes specifically into the reasons of why cooperative sponsorship should be considered. And number one states the board supports opportunities for greater student participation. Again, this is pretty obvious when your numbers are low, but PIAA defines greater opportunities as a lot of different things. Your numbers don't necessarily have to be low. If, for instance, and this has been brought up before, for boys basketball, if we were to combine and open up another level of athletic opportunity, for instance, 9th grade basketball, that students would be able to partake of, that would be greater opportunities for greater participation in a sport. All of those reasons have to be considered. This board specifically, both Unions and AC Valleys and our administrative team have worked together, and the main reason being simply the numbers of participants in any of our sports and continuing to have the programs within our schools. That's been the driving force. The next point there, under why we would have cooperative sponsorship of the sport, I want to point out also, and that would be under number 3 in the handbook, and it says, the board, meaning the board of PIAA directors, will not approve agreements where an intent of the agreement is to improve the quality of the team. For example, obtaining a better win or loss record. I want everybody to know that that has never been a discussion point with any of us at the administrative level or at the board level. If you follow basketball at all, you would have seen this year at the state level, there was a huge percentage of parochial schools that won the state championships. Rural schools combining cooperative agreements is not going to put a dent in that as far as improving our win or loss record and making it to a state playoff game. Does it help? I mean, obviously it helps. More numbers means that you can draw from another set of individuals that may or may not have better skills. But that's not the intent of any of these agreements. Make sure that that's clear. The second piece that I'd actually like to discuss is, and this is the part where it gets a little bit fuzzy because of the attorney speak, and that's in regard to whether or not we would be able to participate in playoffs. And that's specifically when our application is put in for a cooperative sport, and when, as far as PIAA would recognize that application, and if the application would change the classification of our teams. So just to let you know what happens, PIAA every 2 years does their sampling of the population of all schools across Pennsylvania. And they set up the classifications of schools based upon that, both in girls' sports and in boys' sports. The handbook specifically says, request for the approval of cooperative sponsorship of sports agreements which would affect the classification size of a team must be approved by the applicable PIAA district committee and submitted to the PIAA Board of Directors by October 1st of any odd-numbered year to be considered for approval for the immediately following 2-year reclassification cycle. So what that means, this is an odd-numbered year, 2023. If we are to cooperate with union in any sport, we have to do it by October 1st if it was to change the classification of our teams. In girls' sports, it would change the classification. We would go from single A to double A, somewhere around the neighborhood of 2 individuals. Will put us over that level. That has to be a consideration for this because, and I just looked this over with Mr. Kendall, you move over to another section here, it says the Board of Directors may consider approval of agreements which would affect the classification size of the team during the current classification cycle with the consideration given to the following parameters. And number 1, for team sports, the schools agree to forego participation in any postseason competition. I have to get clarification on this to be sure that what it looks like to both Mr. Kendall and I, that if we did put our agreement before the PIAA Board of Directors this year in the 2023 classification cycle, we may not be able to go into playoffs at the state level. That does not mean we can't play in the KSAC playoffs. That doesn't mean that we can't have any other playoffs, just not state playoffs sanctioned by PIAA. Now, in regards to the boys' sports, and again, we're not talking about boys' basketball currently, it would not change our classification. It's up there pretty close to that line, but it does not change the classification. So at any time, you could submit an application to be cooperative in that particular sport without changing the classification. Those are the specific things that I wanted to point out by PIAA so that moving forward, you're a little more informed as to some of the things that we have to consider when we are looking at this. That's all I have for this part. Talk to me, Devin.
And at this time, we'll open up. We have a mic. Any parents that have a concern or need further clarification as far as the cooperative programs that we've set up with the 2 school districts? Paul, start us off.
Paul Murray, a lot of you know me, I think most of you do. I've got 6 kids, mixed family. 3 of them graduated from school. 1 of them is in chorus band, went to PNEA, had a number of chairs, went to states and band. The 2 other ones, they played football from 2nd grade to graduation, did pretty good. Both had pretty good records. My concern is I have a 10, 11-year-old, 4th and 5th grade, and that group of kids are very competitive and are very athletic. Being president of youth football, we have 21 board members and officers, so we have 20 people other than me that are involved. You know, these parents are involved, they're involved with their kids. Our junior team had 33 kids on it, 3 from Keystone, the rest were from AC Valley. So you know, when these, yeah, 110 altogether. So what I'm looking at when we start talking merging sports, you know, these parents are involved. You know, I think Mr. Jordan said, you know, the kids and the parents don't make up the program, but if they're bought into it, they do. You know, they take their kids to practice, they make sure they're at practice, they're involved. So what I'm looking at when we're talking merger is the opportunities. You know, I think AC Valley Little League, we have two minor teams. Union has two major, I believe 3 minor teams. Their youth football at the same level, I think they had 25 kids and 3 were from Keystone. So, and they're involved too, their parents. So if we merge, which if we don't have the numbers, I'm all for it. But as we go and these group of kids come up, you know, this class, we have 30 kids that are involved. Mr. Jordan said, you know, it looks like 50% don't do varsity, so you have 15 kids that are going to be involved in almost every sport. So, plus, you know, union. So, if we, just like basketball, you have 5 on the court, you need 5 backups, and a couple extra. So, if you have more than that, even the competition trying to be a starter isn't there. There's too many. And that's all our concerns. As we ask questions, you know, we get different answers in, you know, how things work. And, you know, a lot of us are in the gray of what's actually happening. So I think that's what this is about, and I appreciate all you coming on and listening to us.
Is there a specific sport that you're looking at, Paul? Like,
Well, you know,
because I think football,
football,
I think 40
I don't
kids
think
on
we need to
football
touch
team.
that
Yeah.
track. We don't need to touch that.
Right.
That's fine. But, you know, as I hear basketball and stuff like that, it's like, well, how many kids do we actually need? Then when you merge, you got to put travel time on there too. There's an hour of bus ride each night that these kids got to go. You know, either they're going to Union or they're coming to AC Valley. So, you know, it is a concern. And people are like, you know, saying to me that, well, maybe your kids are mediocre. Well, I feel my kids are always going to be a starter. They're very good. And if they're not a starter and they get bored and they do quit, they'll be fine. We'll do something else. It's these kids that actually need the program, who don't have the opportunity, you know, betting all the waiting on them. There's other things waiting on them out there, you know. So I'm just looking at it as opportunity level. But if we have the numbers, we ought to have 2 single teams. If we don't have the numbers, let's not. But I think it ought to be looked year to year.
Thanks, Paul. Just to follow up to that, we do meet periodically. We've been meeting on a biannual basis with both committees and taking a look at those numbers. I'm just going to give it to Dr. Kimmel and let him explain a little bit about the ongoing discussion, and maybe he can share some of the information as far as how some of these discussions get started.
So just to talk specifically about basketball, and we'll just kind of throw volleyball in there because it was discussed, I think, publicly as well. To kind of give a history of where we've been with those sports in particular, on April 29th of last year, we held a joint meeting with a couple representatives from AC Valley and then Union. We actually met here last year. The year prior, we met over at Union at our library as well. So we've been trying to have those meetings on a regular basis, discuss co-ops just in general, how they're working at those schools. Are there any concerns? Things that we need to change. Some of those are things concerning like transportation, hiring of coaches, where we play certain games, how we set up our homecoming games, things like that as well. Whenever we got to the end of our discussion last year, we agreed, I think, that both schools appreciated the co-ops that we were operating, that they've been working very well. Last year being the 21-22 year was a very successful year, I think, for our programs. No major concerns, so we were in agreement that things were working well. At that point, both sides decided that, you know, we could look at basketball, continue discussion, see if that was something that we wanted to explore. So we both brought that back to our boards. At some point throughout, I want to say May or June of that year, those discussions kind of faded away. We decided it wasn't something that we needed to pursue at that time. Coming into October, I think there were some staffing changes with some of the sports, especially basketball. A couple of the coaches came to the athletic directors, said, hey, this is something that we really need to explore. Our numbers aren't where we really want them. we think that our programs are possibly dying and that we need to consider co-oping. Is this something that we can do for this year? We set up a meeting and we did it virtually between the coaches, ADs, and administrators to determine was this something that we wanted to continue as far as the conversation. Through that conversation, mostly in support, there were a couple of people that had a few concerns. We decided to bring that information back to our boards and decide whether, or have them decide whether we wanted to try to rush things through for the current school year or not. As we had those discussions with our boards, we figured out it was going to be rushed too quickly. We didn't want to proceed with something and be hasty with making a decision. So we did not do that for the current year. And then with that, we did agree though that we would continue those discussions moving forward, and we wanted to get on those early this year. So we started with those discussions about basketball here in, I want to say, January, February. We had a meeting with coaches, athletic directors, and then administrators again to once again look at our numbers, see where we were going to be for next year, and whether we even wanted to continue that conversation with our boards. At that meeting, it was decided that our numbers were very low for girls basketball, boys on the fence, and volleyball was pretty much off the table because our numbers were good. So we brought that back to our respective boards and have continued that discussion. So I know in the public, I think there's been a little bit of finger pointing as far as, AC Valley approached Union or Union approached AC Valley, and the answer to that is yes. At one point in time, one school approached the other school to continue that conversation, but it all started together jointly here between our representative groups on April 29th of last year. So I think that kind of gives us a history as to where we started that.
Dr. Jordan asked me to talk about the opportunities you mentioned, Mr. Murray. For football last year, we had 11 varsity football games. We played 6-ish. I don't want to give you, I can't say the exact number. I can't get my phone off the internet here. 6-ish JV games, which neither school had played JV prior to the cooperative agreement. And we played 6 to 7 junior high games. And I believe we only had 3 or 4 AC Valley young men on that junior high football team, if I'm not mistaken. And so this year we're playing 20 varsity baseball games, 15 JV ball games, complete ball games, not just innings after, and 16 junior high games. We're playing 20 varsity softball games, 13 or 14 JV ball games. If we can pick somebody up to replace Carn City, it would be 14, and 11 junior high games for junior high. So again, the opportunities for JV full games, not just extra innings, or something we've never been able to offer at either school, or very frequently, I shouldn't say we were never able to offer here at Union. You may have been able to at AC Valley. And we are also offering 9 track meets and 4 invitationals, plus sending 3 athletes to the Penn Relays, which is a national elite track opportunity for our young athletes. So in terms of opportunities, we've been able to, because of the co-ops, offer more opportunities for our kids from both schools than we have been able to do in the past, and not just extra innings, but full games. Last night, the softball team, I saw Coach walk in. I think you guys played a full JV game and a full varsity game, or JV, and so on. So, those opportunities are what we're looking at. So the kids they have that opportunity to do things.
Right,
So
and
that's what we're looking at doing.
That's great, that's great. But what I'm looking at is, the margins are great, but what happens when we get too many kids? As long as we're addressing that situation, that's great.
I think one of the things I've said to the board of Union, I think they would all agree to this, is you can look at one grade and they have a lot of numbers, but remember, you need a pot of grades. Because if you don't have those numbers around them, then
It's not an easy job.
you're not going to build a program.
I understand.
I think that's the big picture, is we're looking at the programs, not necessarily a group of kids within that
Right.
certain grade level. We're looking at the program and the health of the program and the building the program up on different levels.
Right,
And that's what the numbers enables us to do that, especially this spring.
right. And then, like, you know, we had questions about it, nobody can answer them. You know, and then you get 2 or 3 different answers. So, you know.
That's what this is for, it's for
Absolutely,
disclosure.
we
I think
should
it's
have
good.
been doing this the whole time, is how I look at it. But, you know,
Well, it's tough to organize, that's the other
It
thing,
is.
with everybody's schedules.
And it's not an easy job, I appreciate everything that everybody does. That's my piece, and that's where I'm coming from. So, thank you all.
Thanks, Paul.
But I think Dr. McDevitt said it very well, that we do review these things on a regular basis. So co-op agreements, as we register those with Piedmont later for a 2-year cycle. So as we continue to look at the programs, if something changes dramatically, we always do have the option to go a different direction. And we like to keep our thumb on the pulse of what's happening. So it's not like you buy in, you're stuck in it. Now, I would definitely recommend that we don't do 2 years in a co-op agreement and 2 years out of an agreement and 2 years back in. It's not going to do anybody any good. But you do have the ability, if you can see that you're going to have a 10-year stretch of time where you're going to have tons of kids and you're going to overwhelm programs with participants, maybe you do look at sport in the park.
And Paul, I think you make a great point. We want as many kids as possible to participate. We don't want to be cutting kids. And if it wasn't for sports, I wouldn't be in the position I am right now. I mean, probably most of us in the room could say the same.
I think gives the kids, you know, reason to come to school and be a part of the school, stuff like that. And just from, you know, asking questions and the answers that we got, I just want to make sure that that is being addressed.
I think that's why we offer multiple sports, because not everybody's a multi-sport athlete.
Right.
And some kids are football players, some kids are basketball players, some kids are track or baseball guys. Some kids are all of those. But, you know, there are some kids that are specialized in certain areas. And they realize, hey, I'm not going to be the starter on the basketball team, so I'm going to go in this direction and really focus on this. It sorts itself out.
And some don't even play, they find out they want to do something else.
Yeah, and the music thing, you know, like one of your boys was involved in music, so that's.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Jessica Barostek. I'm sure everybody knows me too. I just have a couple questions. At the last meeting, one of the words that I had a big issue with was our sports program has to be thriving. Dr. Jordan, I'd like you to give me a definition on thriving, because I feel as though your definition on thriving and the athlete's definition of thriving is different. And to me, in a sports, it's the student athlete's opinion that should matter more than the school board's opinion of what thriving is. So what is your definition of thriving?
My definition of thriving is exactly what we've already spoken about, providing as many opportunities, and it doesn't even have to be athletes or athletics. My daughter is thriving in music because of the opportunity that she's had available to her in music. She tried volleyball, didn't find it to be her thing, but she had the opportunity to go do something else, and that's my definition of thriving, is to provide as many opportunities at the high school as what I possibly can. That's a multitude of sports, that's a multitude of musical programs, that's a multitude of art programs within the school, as many opportunities as I can provide. That's a thriving program.
Okay, so I guess my other question would be, is if a kid sits on the bench for 90% of the season, how are they going to view that as a thriving season for them as the athlete? I mean, we may bring home a win, but for that athlete, like Paul said, that needs that sport more, you've just taken the thrive out of that sport for them. So then you have to look at the damage you're doing to that athlete because they sat on the bench because you went from having 20 girls on a softball team to now you have 35 or 40 and they just don't get to play. So now they're not thriving.
Well, I can tell you specifically for softball, if that's what you're talking about, they are thriving. To have JV games, 14 JV games in a season when before the most they ever played was 2, I'm talking 2 full games. Those are JV players that are thriving. They are able to play full games up to 14 games this year.
The reason we couldn't play JV before is because we didn't have anybody to play.
And we didn't have the numbers and the players that
Valley
were
had
able to play
numbers.
with. But I'm saying baseball's the same way. Baseball playing full JV games, that's a thriving program. I would say that across all levels of the cooperative sports that we have. Football, same way. JV games that are being played, junior high that has 16 games in a season, that's a thriving sport.
That's a lot of games, and if you bring home wins, yeah, that's viewed as thriving, but I'm still asking about those students who don't get to play. That would get to play if they had their own team, because I know right now, and the season for softball's just started, I know at least 4 girls who have no intention of going to softball next year, because they're not seeing playing time. And they lettered last year because they had enough playing time. And I know you're gonna say, well, now they have more competition and da-da-da-da-da, but that's not the issue.
Thriving is just not having students just participate either. I mean,
But you just said it was, by providing them opportunities to play. But if they're on the bench, they're not playing because there's too many other players to play. So they're not thriving. So that's one thing I had a big issue with, is what your definition of thriving. And you're saying, well, because we're giving them more opportunities. But you're not. You're providing more games, but you're taking away opportunities by merging and having too many players now.
I would say maybe what you're saying is for a specific student, but as far as students overall, the fact that we can field those teams, that is a thriving program.
Why are
It's
you
still
not
a
taking
thriving
that up with
program.
the coach about why he's not playing those kids? Like, I mean, I'm saying because I'm a parent of a merged baseball team. And our coaches know that we have talent and skills on both sides, and they rotate those kids. My son gets just as much playing time as that kid from Union because we have enough players, so they rotate through, but that's up to the coach to play your kid. So,
I'm not saying it is my kid. My kid's still
but
playing.
I'm just saying
But
anybody's
it's not my
child.
place to fight for those. I know I'm here fighting for them, but it's not my place to go up and say, hey, so-and-so's kid isn't playing, why aren't they playing? I'm here today to tell you that this is an issue. My kid's playing.
To me, that sounds like a coaching issue. I'm just saying, like, as somebody sitting on the athletic committee, I would say that to me sounds like a coaching issue. If a parent has an issue with their child not playing because there are other players that are getting more playing time and it's a skill issue, I think, to me, if somebody came to me, I would say, have you discussed that with the coach? Because I feel like that would need to go to a coach level before it comes to a board as talking about numbers. If kids aren't playing or getting rotated in, to me, that sounds like a coaching issue, and I could be totally way off base.
These girls played last year. They lettered in this sport, and now all of a sudden, they're not playing. Could it be a skill issue? It could, but from what I understand, those girls also aren't given the opportunities to practice a lot in practice because they're focusing on their starters.
Then that sounds like
Yes,
a
it's a
coaching issue.
coaching
Yeah.
issue, but I'm just here making you all aware that perhaps you need to make your coaches aware that they need to be developing the skills on these players who aren't getting as much playing time, because therefore you're taking their opportunity away because you have your select 9 or 10 that are great players, and you're letting the other 9 or 10 who you don't really view as great players kind of go by the wayside. So yeah, parents can go and address it, but if the board doesn't make it an issue with those coaches saying you need to be spending time with these kids who don't show promise too, because being a kid coach is not just, I'm gonna coach the best kids and forget the rest. Those kids that aren't the best are the kids that they should be focusing on, because you don't know what their life is. And as a board, you need to make sure your coaches are well aware of that as well.
Well, it sounds like maybe it's an isolated sport, because I see it from my perspective from the boys' side. The football coaches, I see that happening. The baseball coaches, I see that happening. So maybe it is a coaching issue with one particular sport that needs to be addressed, maybe with Bill or Dave or something like that. I mean, we don't coach the coaches as a board,
Right.
and that's not our job. But I see the other sports that are co-opted, mainly football, basketball, because that's what I see. I do see the time being spent with all of the kids, not a select few of the kids. So I think maybe it's a coaching issue for one particular sport that needs to be addressed.
I would agree, if I can, just for just a second, I would agree with what Carrie has to say there. It sounds like a personnel issue to me. And one of the things that I think every member of the administrative team up here believes in is that chain of command. And if you've already addressed it with the coach, then it probably should have gone straight to Dave Sherman. And if you don't get an answer there, then it comes to me as the voting principal and on up. I have to tell you, Mrs. Rostick, I have not fielded one single phone call about any of the coaches this season so far. So, I mean,
So it hasn't been brought to you by the board, any board members, that there's a coaching issue in any sport?
Excuse me?
It hasn't been brought to this board that there's been a coaching issue in any sport?
I have not heard of any issues.
It was discussed in an executive session last month, Bill.
For a sport,
For
but not
a sport.
necessarily the sport.
He's not included in executive.
He's not in executive sessions.
It has
Unless
not been brought to
requested.
my attention that there's an issue in the coaching with softball, if that's what you're talking about.
I'm not talking about softball, but there has been brought up a coaching issue.
Okay, but we can't get into personnel issues like I want
And
to
I
say at this
understand, that's
meeting.
why I'm not trying to bring it up, it's the board who's bringing up the coaching issue. I was just asking what the definition of driving was, and you guys said it's opportunity, and I'm telling you that some of these kids are losing opportunity because we have too many kids, and I'm telling you, girls are quitting programs. I believe we've already had 3 quit softball. Like, they just said, nope, it ain't worth it, and they quit. And I'm telling you, we have at least 3, 4 to 5 that aren't playing next year. So I'm trying to make you aware of an issue that these girls are saying, it's not worth it because I don't get to play. So how many times are we going to co-op? Is it going to get to the point where we need a third school to co-op? Because we have one girl who didn't want to co-op, but she played anyway, but she's not playing next year because she doesn't want to co-op. And then I have several girls who say, I'm not playing next year because I don't get to play. I don't want to be on a team that I'm not part of a team. And to me, nobody's looking at the athlete's perspective on this. No one's asking the athletes their opinions.
We have had a lot of athletes give their perspective. I mean, honestly, we have. We've heard from other sports and other athletes.
Well, I have a daughter who plays just about every girl's sport there is. And I said, have you ever been asked? The answer was no. I have friends in the audience who girls play every sport. And I said, has your daughter been asked? The answer was no. So somebody's losing or misleading the truth on if these athletes are actually being talked to. We had enough girls 2 years ago for basketball, no issues. Now this year you had 5 girls. Did anybody look into why the other girls didn't play? No, nobody's asked. Because we'll just go up with union and then we don't have to worry about it. I know you say you're trying to do what's best for them, but you're not looking to why they're leaving the sport. These girls aren't leaving the sport just because they wanted to leave the sport. There's a reason behind it. And instead of just using co-op as the answer, we need to find out why they're not joining the sport. But nobody wants the answer, and that's why we're not asking.
Mrs. Rostick, even if those couple of students played girls' basketball this year, we still would not have been able to play JV ball. The numbers are still way too low. That's a fact. You will always have issues where one player doesn't feel comfortable or doesn't feel like they're getting the attention they deserve or whatever the case may be. Co-ops can't be based upon a single individual. It has to be based upon the overall group of students. And for girls basketball, I can tell you this, if we have 5 players next year, we will not have a program. We cannot run a varsity program with 5 girls. Can't do it.
And I completely agree, but what I'm saying is you had 5 juniors not play this year. Did anybody ask why? That would have gave you 10 varsity players. Did anybody ask them why they're not playing this year? You didn't ask.
We started out with 9 originally, and after the season got started, 1 quit, then another 1 quit. I did not
Did you
ask,
ask
I did
why?
not ask why they quit. But I found out after the fact. But again, not one single person came to me. If a parent was very concerned about their student not playing, why didn't I get a phone call? Why didn't Dave Sherman get a phone call? Did
Perhaps
anyone
because we
ever
made calls
speak to the
before
coach?
nothing's happened.
Did anyone ever speak to the coach and say, this is why I'm quitting your team?
Probably not, because they didn't want backlash in any other sport.
Well, nothing can be done if it's not brought to our attention.
If I could address real quick the JV question you asked a couple minutes ago, Mrs. Verostek. My coach talked to me over the weekend with a concern about JV softball. I feel like I'm being really loud. JV softball. And when we were at Sligo, there are 2 fields side by side, and they're able to practice the JV on one field and the varsity on another. I think if I'm hitting a question you're asking, because some of the JV girls aren't getting enough practice time. So what I suggested was when they come to Perry Township, it's only 4 or 5 miles for the JV team to be then taken by bus over to Sligo, and they can practice the JV girls there, so that those girls are getting an opportunity to practice, and there's not a lot of sitting around and so on. So my coach brought that to me this weekend. I think we have a solution to get the girls hopefully more involved that aren't starting in the varsity program or the top 10 or 12, whatever number, I'm not familiar with softball enough to answer that, but 10 or 12 softball girls. Then the rest of the girls can either, if they're in Sligo, there's 2 other opportunity fields there for the JV to go practice that separately. And if not, we will then, if the coaches want to, they can take those girls up to Sligo, the JV girls, with a couple coaches and practice them there, so they're not just sitting and watching the other kids play. So hopefully we've addressed that situation. It was brought to our attention this weekend. Hopefully we've addressed it, and it's going to be taken care of. And if it isn't, I would really like for someone to let us know so we can address that, because agreed, we don't want them just standing around. So we did address that this weekend, and hopefully it is. And if you do have a daughter that plays JV softball and you're out in the audience, feel free to let Dave or I know, because then I can address it with at least our coach, because I think she was helping with the JV pretty much. So we can then, it's only 4 or 5 miles to take them up there, practice those girls, and give them an opportunity to practice on a field as well as the varsity team.
I think that's a great solution. I appreciate you doing that for the girls. The other issue I wanted to bring up is transportation. AC Valley girls right now are expected to get on a regular school bus with however many kids are on the bus. Colleen tells me it's a very packed bus. And when they get on, they have their school book bag, they have their uniform bag, they have their softball bag, and it's just really not realistic to expect them to get on that bus with all those other kids when we have a van. And I signed a paper at the beginning of the season that said coaches would transport them to practices, and now they're being crammed onto a bus with arms full of luggage, more or less, and it's very difficult for them to do that. So I just wanted to know why we're not using the vans that we have or a bus for our girls.
I'll speak on that. We have 1 van, and it's being used for junior high and baseball and softball to transport those athletes back and forth to practice. There's really not an option of using the van to get girls over there. That is the only option that we really have, is that bus. It stops right there in West Freedom. She worked with me to figure out a way to get them off the bus safely so that they don't have to cross the road. She was very good to work with on that, and it was really one of our only options.
Okay.
So, like I said, transportation is extremely limited, and it's a juggling act.
Okay. Is there a reason we didn't look at that before the go-off, I
They can't do
guess?
that. The van contractors can't. Mr. McDivitt, Dr. McDivitt brought that up. Van contractors have runs just like the regular buses, so that's really not an issue, or not an option, because they have to take kids home from school at 2:30 and we can't run kids over to the ball field. So that is an issue.
But the co-op, you said about it being looked at before the co-op, but that would not impact, our girls riding the bus to West Freedom would happen regardless whether we had a co-op or not. Or am I misunderstanding the issue with the co-op?
They were
and how
actually
that-
transported by other students before the co-op. There was no transportation provided by AC Valley at all.
But
So
I
this
think,
is better now that we're at least we're transporting.
but I think that was because of a change of policy.
A little bit also, there are maybe 2 girls
That have their
drive
buses.
on the varsity team, and it was never a good situation, and we never liked that. I would much rather put those girls on a bus, crammed as it, or, as difficult as it is for them to load up on that bus. I would much rather have my child ride a bus than with 3 other girls in the car.
Yeah.
Going 70
Oh, I
miles
agree
an hour.
completely, that,
So, I mean,
but like I said, I just know from my daughter's experience, it's very difficult to gather all of her gear and get on that bus when that bus is already loaded. So I just didn't know if there was a different possibility.
It doesn't sound like it for this year because spring sports were overwhelmed with transportation.
The addition of the junior high programs has hurt our ability to transport tremendously. So we're still trying to get settled with those issues.
I think that's all the questions I have for now. I mean,
Thank you, Jessica. You brought up some really good points. Would anybody else like to address the board that we have up here this evening?
Hi, I'm April, and my daughter is in 6th grade, so I know nothing of the high school sports. However, the friends that I have in high school are scaring me. They complain about all kinds of things. But my questions are, why do we have to co-op? If we don't have enough for a team, why can't the students just choose where they go? So we have students in Clintonville area that would be going all the way to Union. Fortunately, I'm close to Union, but my child plays in all of the sports. If it's a sport, she's signing up. I don't feel like she won't get to play, she's a great athlete, but I am concerned about the students that will not be picked for the teams, will sit on the benches, and I think that sports are a great outlet for all kids, they need it.
An answer to your question of why can't they choose where to go, like a Clintonville student, is the PIAA rules dictate that you co-op with a school that you border with. Unless there's something like a swimming that is not offered in a school that borders with you. But the PIAA rule dictates that you co-op in the school that you border with, and you can only co-op then like one sport with one school. Like you can't say, okay, these kids can go to Monotone, play basketball or baseball or softball. These kids can go to Union. These kids can go to Keystone. These kids can go to Red Bank, Carson City. It's one school, but you have to have a contiguous border with that school in order to have a cooperative agreement with them.
Is that just for the high school level?
Yes, from junior high up.
Okay, because.
Yeah.
Coach here, she played at Keystone for baseball and she cheered with Union, so like we just went where it was convenient. I did have another, I'm just wondering this. And the coaches are, so we're going to be joining with Union, and the way that we are seeing it as Union is in charge. So Union, AC Valley is joining Union, and we're using their coaches and their facilities and,
No, that will not be the way it is.
I can tell you I'm a junior high baseball coach, and there are 3 of us. The other 2 coaches are from AC Valley, Jamie Preston and Mr. Allworth, excuse me, I keep saying Allsworth. There are 3 coaches. I'm the only one from Union. And I can say to all of you out there, it does not matter who is in charge of our co-ops. We have worked very, very hard, and I will say this very passionately, because I've been involved with this since way back with Ron Curlin. We looked at a co-op with Red Bank, and you looked at a co-op with Keystone. At that point in time, You were going to be charged money, and so were we, and you were going to be Panthers, and we were going to be Bulldogs. Simple as that. We did not want either school to lose their identity, so we have remained the Falcon Knights, or it doesn't make, Falcon Damsels does not sound right. So we go AC Valley, UHS, or UHS, AC Valley. But we do our very, very best to practice an equal amount at both schools. We do our very, very best if able to. I know there's some situations where maybe one of our facilities isn't available or isn't up to where we want it to be, or vice versa. But we try to play all of our games. We try to split those as well. We try very, very hard to make sure your student athletes and ours, and we're passionate about this, get to maintain their identity as Falcon Knights or AC Valley Union High School. And I think if there's some parents out there in junior high baseball, you can know that I treat your kids every bit as good as I do our Union kids, and will continue to do so, because your kids over here mean just as much to me as our Union kids mean. And I am passionate about giving these kids an opportunity, and they can maintain. You guys have a rich tradition over here, and so do we. I don't want to see you be a Panther and us be a Bulldog, ever. I'm sorry. And as long as we can maintain our co-op together, it's not going to be a Knight or a Falcon or a Bulldog or a Panther. We're going to maintain the identities of our school, and that is extremely important to me. I have a child coming up through. I'm thrilled he's going to be a Falcon Knight. I'm thrilled my daughter, some of her best friends are from over here. I'm thrilled that she's a member of the UHS ACV track team. Some of her best friends are from over here. And your student athletes have got to maintain their identity. Your schools maintain your identity. That happens nowhere else. I can't think of one other place in the whole state of Pennsylvania where two schools have merged and they kept both names of the schools. But that has been something important, and I've done this since 2001. And we have done what we can do to make sure both schools maintain their identity. So if I sound passionate about this, I am. Your kids mean just as much to me as our kids at Union do.
I have another question. How do the finances of this work? So if we merge, how does?
We split costs as much as possible.
Okay.
We are looking at forming one board committee to hire coaches. We are looking at any time we can get an opportunity to save money for you as a taxpayer, we want to. But we also want to provide opportunities for your kiddos and our kiddos to be able to participate in not just athletics, but music. I know there's been talk about co-ops there. There's other opportunities you can do, but we try to split the money. If a bus originates or starts right here in AC Valley, you pay for that trip. If a bus starts at Union, we pay for that trip. We try to divide those up as equally as possible, so it's not costing you more money at AC Valley or Union people more money. We diligently, I have a paper here somewhere. We diligently sit down, Mr. Sherman and I, and we work on transportation each week and try and make sure that, like, we practiced 2 weeks for track over here at AC Valley the last 2 weeks because we had a track meet at Union this week. Didn't want to say, okay, we're going to go 2 weeks at Union because we have a track meet there. So we went 2 weeks at AC Valley. Now, unfortunately, there were some breaks in there, the school off, but there's nothing we can do about that. But wherever the trip originates is where that school district pays the driver for the transportation. And then right now in coaching, if you are the host school, and again, it doesn't matter, it's just a name for the PIAA, because we try to make everything equal. All that matters, that school pays. We'd like to look at something different in that respect, but that's what we're looking, that's how we do it currently. We're fully transparent.
I wanted to follow up on your second question. You heard some horror stories. This morning I talked to both Stacy and Ray Fox, who are both coaches and parents. And Stacy's a living legend around here if you work with her. And they both had nothing but positives to say about the co-ops and the relationships that AC Valley students have made with the Union students and vice versa. And she went on, and Ray sent me a wonderful email that outlined the experiences that he's had throughout that too. So I think that, you know, there's
Like I
good and
said,
bad with it.
My daughter's played with Keystone kids, she's played with Union kids, and that's fine. But like I said, we're right on that border. I'm the first house in the East Valley School District. But the parents that are far away, that's where, I mean, kids are riding buses. My child rides a bus for 50 minutes just to get home, let alone with the sports, you know, it's hard on the kids. And plus all the schoolwork. So, but I'm April, my child will be in all the sports, so I'm a squeaky wheel, I don't keep quiet. So nice to meet you, and I'll see y'all throughout high school.
Well, we like having parents involved with our students, so.
Just as we close up this evening, if there's a couple more questions or comments, feel free to jump up here. I know that we're shooting to finish up by 7:30.
Hi, I'm Amanda Rankin. I've graduated from UC Valley. I have kids in UC Valley. I recently became a bus driver and an aide for UC Valley this year. And I guess I'll start off by saying, years ago when my daughter could do cheerleading, and this is before COVID and everything, as soon as I found out it was co-op or whatever, and we were going to union, I said, nope, I'm not doing it. Like, I was a working mom. I have a husband that works. A lot of us parents are working a couple different jobs. We don't have time to like get our kids here, get our kids there, make sure they're doing their homework and getting them to bed, getting them meals and everything. So like, I didn't even think about it. And then that's another thing, like, have you guys like asked the parents or whatever, like, if it's not co-op, how many kids would play? Because I know there's a lot of parents that don't put their kids in it because, and especially after COVID and what that did to all these kids, I see the talent and the interest and like, we are all these parents that are very involved in our kids, and if we didn't care, we wouldn't be here asking these questions because I think the majority of us have the littler kids. We're not in high school yet. So also like parents, with as hard as the schoolwork is and everything, to do the sport, still get all their homework done, get good grades, get a good amount of sleep, get a good meal. It's just hard for them to do that. And then I think we're wanting to know, like, instead of being locked in, you guys kind of touched base, but like, could you look at it yearly? Like, if there's so many kids or whatever, or if we would go back to just the two schools, like, it would be easier for that school, like Union and AC Valley, because our parents, like, if they could just stay after school, do their practices or whatever, like, and not have the 20-30 minute commute, like, the gas is expensive now. And I'm in the school, I see the talent, I see the kids, like, they don't think they're good enough. And then my daughter's in 5th grade, and she played with 5th and 6th graders, and she is one, like, she's determined. She might not be the greatest, but if she gets the practice and gets the time put in, she has the potential to succeed. Like, she is determined, and if she puts her heart into it, she's gonna do better because she wants to.
We'll address the agreement. Bill, do you want to talk about the 2-year agreement?
Because the PIAA, does a 2-year classification, our agreements with the co-ops have been based upon that 2-year cycle. As mentioned before, I think that it would be more difficult to enter co-ops and drop out of co-ops. And to be honest, if we did that, I think the PIAA would probably be a little skeptical the next time that we apply for a co-op.
But I mean, like, if it would just, like, if you guys would just ask, like, is there more kids that want to play but they don't do the co-op, or?
I think the coaches, to be honest, do a pretty good job of trying to recruit players. One thing that I mentioned in the last board meeting, and of course the union people here wouldn't have heard that, but at the elementary level, I mean, every kid wants to play every sport. That's the truth. If we were to ask, I think there are 44 kids in 6th grade right now. If we were to ask who wants to play basketball next year, we'd probably get 42 of them. That's how passionate kids are at that level. But there's a natural attrition when they get to the high school and start to progress more toward 12th grade. Students start to find their niche. They find the thing that they're really passionate about and they stick with it instead of being, not real great at a lot of things, they start to narrow down to being really good at a few things. And it might be, I'll use my own daughter as an example, it might be music. You know, it might be art for some kids. You know, it's difficult to say at the 7th grade level what a student's going to be really good at, because they haven't figured that out yet, what it is that they truly like to do. But by the time they're in 10th, 11th, 12th grade, that's when you see it. That's when you see the students that stick with basketball, or that's the grades that you see students, you know, pick a specific sport and track, those types of things. So that natural attrition happens all the time.
I think too, I guess, with the way the world is, everybody knows it's an awful world we live in. And us parents, I think, try to push our kids to be in the sports, keep them out of the streets and keep them out of, and like these kids that aren't the greatest or don't have the practice, or parents that have the time to put in, like if they would have the chance to be here instead, you know what I mean? It's just.
I agree with you. I agree with you 100% there as far as, you know, we want those kids to participate. There are kids that I see in the hallway and I know that they aren't participating in anything at all. And I wish so much that they would. You know, unfortunately, you know, we have, in a rural area, we have mixed families. We have families where, you know, maybe they live with grandma or grandpa. We have kids that just prefer to sit at home and play video games. You know, there are so many other things that distract our young folks from, you know, doing some of the things that we know would be good for them. There are a lot of benefits to being an athlete. You know, that leadership that comes through, that motivational piece, that part where you work hard to achieve something. The benefits are tremendous. But unfortunately, a lot of our students, especially those in broken homes and in homes that are struggling, they never get a taste of that, and they don't know what it's like.
And then another quick question, like I had a friend just tell me she has a daughter in kindergarten, she was gonna sign her up for T-ball, she missed it, and they were gonna charge her $100 late fee. So she wasn't gonna do it because she's like, I'm not paying $100. Like, why is the late fee so expensive? Is there a reason?
That isn't us.
That's not school.
Oh,
That's not-
sorry. And then was the Facebook thing deleted? Because I was gonna share it about the meeting tonight and I couldn't find it. Was it deleted off the AC Valley page? Or about
I
the
didn't even
meeting
know it was
tonight?
on the page. I didn't see it on the page.
I don't think I sent out the school messenger, and it came out from the email as well.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I just say, you said about students finding their niche. They can't find a niche if they can't play or they're sitting on the bench.
That's why we try to provide as many opportunities as possible.
And then they find what they're good at, and that's where they go.
Is there anybody else that
Sit
have
on the bench, why
questions?
would you stick with it?
Hi, my name is Michelle Bauer, and I have 3 kids that, well, one's graduated, and 2 that are still in the school. I guess my concern is, I don't remember how many years, maybe 2, maybe 3, that we were in the bottom 15th percentile in Pennsylvania for academics. With this new, with the co-op, I mean, we have reading problems, we have math problems, I'm sure it's statewide. But my concern is, how do these kids, I know if my kids were getting a full load of homework, they'd never be able to get it all done. They are gone, like this evening, Lane left it. My youngest boy left at 4 to meet the bus at 4:30 to, maybe it was, I don't know, but he has a 2-hour practice, he is 30 to 40 minutes over there, 30 to 40 minutes back. right in the middle of the night, it's not right after school, it's not, he gets home, it's probably 8 o'clock, whatever, he has to eat dinner, take a shower, there's no time, and the same thing for Lexi, but hers is just a little bit flopped because it's girls. It's hard enough for these kids to keep their grades up and their academics going, but if they had to do this in ninth grade, 10th grade, I mean, it's one thing for us to get through last year and this is their last year completely, and the first year that the girls have ever done this. But if they had to do this from ninth grade on, I don't know where their grades would be. They were both National Technical Honor Society students. But would they have been able to keep their grades up on this end? I highly doubt it. And that in turn would have made me say, you know what? How many years have we been told that you're athletes first, backwards, students first, athletes second? And that they would have not been happy. But to me, they're prepared on a very basic level when they get out of high school, and their grades, sacrificing their grades for athletics just wouldn't make any sense. And this time that they're spending riding on the bus back and forth, or the extra time that they're taking out of school multiple times a week. Now kids, they're like, Yahoo, let's go. And me, I'm like, what the heck is going on? My kids need to be in their program for Career Center. One of them has hours, the other one is in co-op. They're both need their academic skills. They need education. Sports, it's great. I mean, they've been involved in stuff since they were 6 years old. They have played the same sports the whole way through school and continue today. But my concern is that the quality of education will decrease, or kids won't be able to keep up. They won't be able to meet the standards unless the standards go down. I don't know what the low standard is for still being able to play sports with your grades. But they need to learn, and their time, they're all caught up in the evening. It's bad.
Michelle, I appreciate your question, and transportation is definitely a concern. But before I address it, I do want to clarify your 15%. A couple years ago, junior, senior high school was designated on the bottom 15%. Although we were at the very top of it, we were classified with every other high school, which is grades 9 through 12. We're a junior, senior high school, so the 7th and 8th grade PSSAs got tied into it. And I really don't feel as if it was a fair comparison with us. Since then, we've been off the designation for a good number of years, and we take great pride in our academics. But the concern is definitely valid, and I just may add to it, and I'm sure we've all participated. And whenever I was a student athlete in high school, I was a much better academic student than whenever I wasn't. It's not a perfect scenario. I can tell you the transportation is a concern.
Yeah, I'm just saying, I'm concerned with it because I know if my kids were doing this for ninth grade, it would have probably came to a point with academic classes where you either stay with basic classes, and that's fine too, if that's where you want to, where you fit into your niche. But a lot of kids, they don't know if they're going to college, they don't know if they're not going to college until they're right around 10th grade, maybe 11th grade anyways. And as for the 15%, I only mention that because, we all receive letters in there, stating.
The high school students,
Yeah.
and kindergarten students required by law, but I just didn't want the entire group and everybody listening in to think that we're a failed school, because we certainly aren't.
Oh, and yeah, we haven't gotten that letter this year or anything. I just mean we have been in a position like that. Personally, I would want my kids, not being able to read or do their math or whatever, have time to do or be graded early because they don't have time to get the work done. Or, the other way, teachers not assigning the work because they know these kids can't possibly get it done. That's the next concern. And everybody coming out saying, oh yeah, we're not getting anymore. We're basically.
We'd have to schedule another meeting to talk about homework, because that is an ongoing discussion, Michelle. I understand that. As we finish up, is there any, I can legitimately tell you, we are concerned about the bus time. I mean, that's just part of it.
I do have one other question. We have been, and this really relates to, I guess, softball, just my curiosity, because we were told we were the host school, but we're wearing union colors.
We wear AC Valley and Union colors.
What we're wearing is the bottoms are
Yellow.
the blue, yellow, and white.
All the co-op sports share the blue, yellow, and white. I think it's all the same.
Maybe that's why I didn't look at it that way, because it's first year for co-op for them.
Yeah.
And I'm used to the blue and the white.
No, and they're blue and yellow, so we combine with blue, yellow, and white.
Yeah.
And Union paid for all the uniforms and the jackets, so we did have to vote in because of that reason. But you're right, Ms. Summergust, we do, blue and white was a common for both. And then the gold was with Union, so that's why those three colors have been on every uniform we have.
I did have one more question. Mr. Jordan had said for the girls' basketball, it changes from A1 to A2. Why does that not change the boys? Does it go off of how many girls are in both districts? So we have more girls in the districts than boys. Okay, that's what I figured, but I just wanted to clarify why it changed the girls and not the boys.
I do have one more question. If the boys would eventually combine, what other school districts have ninth grade teams?
We looked into this whenever the discussion was made or done with this. We would look at scheduling games with Brookville, Punxsutawney, Franklin, Oil City, Grove City. There are a couple other District 10 schools that I'm just being honest with you, they slip my mind right now. And a couple other, Dave, can you help me out?
I would say Slippery Rock.
Yeah, Slippery Rock.
It's not as far as you would think. I don't know. Slippery Rock doesn't. I don't know.
Carn City does.
Carn City does, yeah.
Yeah, we
Like,
look at
there are local
games.
schools, we could pick up a ninth grade schedule. And just because we're playing a ninth grade schedule, if there's a kid that needs to move up, that kid can move up. That's a coach's choice. But my point
I was
is,
just curious.
it's not gonna cause a ton of
I've
travel.
not heard of ninth grade team anywhere before.
Some of the bigger schools, and we don't go to District 10 enough sometimes. We get stuck in Clarion County. There are a lot, it's half an hour over there for some of those schools, you know?
That's great, but none of those schools are going to have a ninth grade team. Maybe, like Mercer.
Grove City.
Farrell.
Yeah, some of them do not.
No,
We
they're
did check
the
with
same size we are.
Oil City, Franklin, Grove City, Slippery Rock. And again, we're trying to limit, we want to get the number of games up to equal, which I think it's 13 or 14 for 7th, 8th grade, or A and B, whatever you want to call it right now. We wanted to try and equal that number for the ninth grade, but we also didn't want to travel to Erie to play a ninth grade basketball game, so we took that into consideration as well. Punxsutawney was about as far as we would like to go. St. Mary's would be iffy. It's a little, up the interstate, it's not as far as what you think, but we did take that into consideration as well when we looked at the schools in terms of, the distance before we said we could do a ninth grade program, but I really feel that if we do it, just like this morning, I was on a field trip with our yearbook club, and a guy from Clarion said, hey, you guys are doing junior high baseball, why can't we do it? that's not our call. Well, we need to get it if you get, I think if you would start doing a ninth grade program here, then you're gonna see Carson City and Keystone and those other schools around here get it as well, because they're gonna wanna compete at those levels, and I think it would be, catch on, and I think you would get more local games than not, eventually, not right away, but eventually.
Okay, in closing this evening, we do really appreciate your concern and your parent support as well. We need you as much as you need us here at the school district. Please stay involved with your students as they continue to work their way from the elementary school to the high school. We really appreciate that, and have a great night.